Hello, welcome to our webinar on identifying and responding to the signs of bullying. We're excited to have two guest speakers that will be presenting some great information to you. If you are having trouble with the sound or any technical difficulties, please type into the chat box that you should be able to access, and you can send a message to just the panelists or all of the attendees. We are excited that we've got some very good information that we would like to share with you today. And so before we begin, we wanted to give a brief background of the organizations that are sponsoring this webinar. The first is the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law and our Parental Readiness Empowerment Program, or PREP. And PREP's mission is to train parents on their legal rights in their child's education. We do that by providing webinars such as this one, Know Your Rights workshops on key issues like special education, school discipline, English learners, and bullying, discrimination, or harassment. We also offer parent advocacy guides that are available on our website at prepparents.org. We have a YouTube channel that is youtube.com/prepparents, where we offer a lot of different videos for parents on parent advocacy and how to navigate the school system. And we also offer a service where parents can make video appointments with our pro bono attorneys to get their child's educational needs addressed. So we're really excited to continue on with this webinar. Today we have some guest speakers. So Natty, if you can move on to the next slide, please. We will be joined by Michelle Nutter from the Center for Safe Schools, as well as Dr. Mansi Kotwal, who is a clinical assistant professor of pediatrics at Children's National Health System. So if you have any questions throughout this webinar, please ask the question in the webinar chat box. For a quick poll though, it would be helpful to us if, for those of you who are listening, if you're able to type into the chat box and just let us know if you're a parent, an educator, or a school administrator or a community advocate, that would give us a better sense of who's listening. So we'll give you a minute or two to type that into the chat box. Okay, so we'll just wait for the responses to come in, and then I'll just kick it off. It looks like we've got several advocates, parents, and some educators, which is great. Thank you so much for joining us. And just a reminder that this webinar will be recorded, so we will be sending you the link to the recording, and you can share this with your colleagues as well. So I'll be passing this on back to Michelle Nutter and to Dr. Mansi Kotwal. So take it from here, ladies.
Mansi, are you going to start?
Okay, so I guess we're having some problems with Mansi in unmuting herself. So maybe Michelle, you could give a quick background on the Center for Safe Schools and what work you all do.
Sure. So let me start with the Center for Education Equity. I'm wearing two hats tonight. The Center for Education Equity is one of 4 regional technical assistance centers that are funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. And we're charged with providing training and technical assistance to schools in the areas of race, gender, national origin, and religion, and to promote equal educational opportunities. And the Center for Education Equity covers USAID's Region 1, which is comprised of the states from Kentucky, the whole way north to Maine, also includes Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The other hat I'm wearing is for the Center for Safe Schools, and we are one of 20 statewide school safety centers recognized by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Justice, charged with providing training and technical assistance on a host of school safety and youth violence prevention topics. There's my contact information. If I could be of assistance to anyone, please feel free to reach out and connect with me. Email is usually the best way to contact me since I am often in the field.
Okay. Mansi, are you there? It looks like you're unmuted. And
can you guys hear me now?
yes, we can. Great.
Okay. Success. Sorry about that. So just a real brief thing, basically, some of the things that we want to address today, because bullying is a sad reality we see for our youth, is the short and long-term effects of bullying, and what you guys can do as parents, and what kind of things should raise concern that your child is either a bully or a victim of bullying, or just kind of is witnessing this in school. So if we want to start off with just a brief definition. So the CDC defines bullying as any unwanted aggressive behavior by another youth or group of youths that involves an observed or perceived power imbalance. It's often repeated multiple times, or at least is highly likely to be repeated. And bullying may inflict harm or distress on the targeted youth, including physical, psychological, social, or educational harm.
So when we look at bullying, just to break that CDC definition down a little bit, and I want to give a shout out to the Olveus Bullying Prevention Program. I am a certified trainer in that program, but this information that I'm presenting comes from Olveus Bullying Prevention Program. So when we look at the definition of bullying, there is mean, on purpose, aggressive behavior on the part of one or more students. The behavior is often repeated, although we tell folks don't wait until you see a pattern develop, because kids are often good at engaging in these behaviors outside of our notice. And so while it may be the first time that we've observed an activity, that doesn't mean that it truly is the first time that it's happened. And then the last point here, this imbalance of power or strength. So first of all, it could be real or perceived. And when we think about this imbalance of power, it doesn't have only to do with physical size or strength. It could also be emotional or verbal strength. It could be socioeconomic status. It could be popularity. It could be any of those things where one student has or seems to have more power than the student that they target. So we're going to look at some types of bullying next. Most of us are familiar with the direct forms of bullying. This is the in-your-face, hitting, punching, kicking, teasing, taunting, spitting, name-calling, the really overt types of bullying that we think of often. But bullying can also be subtle or indirect in its nature, and this could include gossip, or trying to stir the pot to get someone else to bully for you. It could take the form of exclusion, where one student or group of students says to other students, oh, you can't sit at our lunch table because we're the popular kids. So trying to exclude people. And we also know that unfortunately, bullying today doesn't just happen in person, but it is compounded by cyberbullying, which follows students 24/7. There's really no safe haven or safe harbor from the bullying.
So just a couple more points about cyberbullying. Usually it's not isolated, so often it's going to be in conjunction with bullying in person, so whether that's at school or at some other venue. But some of the things that make it unique, just like was mentioned, it is anonymous. So a lot of times the victim will know who is on the other end, whether it's the phone or whether it's online, whether it's on Facebook, whatever venue it is, but it still is online and therefore is anonymous, and it's difficult to kind of prove who that bully is. It is easily spread. So I'm sure all of you guys have seen how easy it is for some video to go viral on YouTube or some message to get spread very quickly through Facebook. So same thing with cyberbullying. And one of the things is that it is permanent. So while we think that, okay, once you delete something online, it's not there, that's completely not true. It could be that somebody took a photo of what they saw on Facebook. So it is permanent. It does make it permanent. There are many different avenues. So it's not just online. There's phone messages, there's different apps, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, Instagram, what have you, which makes this all very easy to be, a victim of cyberbullying 24/7, which makes it much harder to escape. One of the things that we want to just highlight is that bullying is different than pure conflict. So all of us have suffered from some sort of discordance with a family member or a colleague or a friend at some point in our life. And so it is important to know the difference. So like we talked about with bullying, you have an imbalance of power. In pure conflict, there will be an equal power. I'll just highlight a couple of the important ones. So bullying is purposeful while pure conflict is accidental. And bullying can actually evoke a really strong emotional reaction from the victim and very little, if any, emotional reaction from the bully. Versus in pure conflict, both of them are going to be equally affected emotionally. In bullying, there's going to be no remorse. So the blame is going to be on the victim, not the bully. Versus in pure conflict, somebody will take the blame, whoever's more responsible, whether it's both parties, whether it's more one, and there will be an effort to solve the problem. Versus in bullying, there's really no effort. So let's kind of focus on why does bullying occur. While these are some of the many reasons, I do want you guys to remember that it is multifactorial. So it could be whether people find it fun, they don't like the person, they want to be popular, look cool amongst their colleagues or peers, to get a reaction. There could have been a misunderstanding between the two parties and that escalated. There could be jealousy. So there's many different reasons, and it's often a combination of this plus a combination of kind of what is going on in the person's head. So whether there's depression and anxiety, and we'll kind of get into those in a little bit. But the majority of cases that we see at schools actually have the underlying issue that the bully just wants to look cool in front of their peer group. And that's really the bottom line for the majority of cases. It's not always the case. But just one thing to note is that while the bully may appear to be quote unquote popular, it doesn't mean that they're always liked. But there's still that sense of hierarchy that that person is cooler than me. I am going to have a difficult time standing up to them, and it's going to make it really easy to be a bystander. So even if you're not the victim, if you're just watching this happen, it's going to be difficult to stand up to that person that is quote unquote popular. One of the things that I really want to make sure that we emphasize is that bullying is a behavior. It's not a student. So people are not born bullies. And we talked about the many different reasons why bullying can occur. So when we're talking about changing the behavior of that student, that is what we need to focus on so that we can actually stop this vicious cycle. And finding out the why is going to be very important. So you can address his or her underlying need of that person that's being the bully and then actually stop the cycle. And while a lot of times efforts focusing on the target and trying to get them the services that they need, it is 100% crucial and important to do that. But we also have to address the bully and honestly the bystanders as well to figure out how we can address all of their needs and all of the reasons that this is being kind of done in school or wherever it's being done, so we can kind of stop this cycle. So we're going to kind of classify, when we're talking about the risk factors, we're going to classify, make it two groups, so the perpetrators and then the targets. But we will talk about how there's a lot of other different groups that contribute to bullying in a little bit. But when we're looking at just the two separate groups here, when we're looking at the risk factors of the perpetrators, a lot of them are kind of in 3 different social groups. So some of them are the popular ones, or they want to be popular. Some of them are isolated. So they could be going through depression, anxiety. They could have no friends, and that's kind of why they're leading to being a bully. And some of them are friends of others who bully. So whether it's to fit in with those people or look cool, there's a variety of different kind of groups that we see. And some characteristics that we see for these people is that they could be going through depression or just kind of periods of sadness, anxiety, so mental health kind of related illnesses. They could, in general, have a dominant personality and then be exhibiting it in a negative way, be susceptible to peer pressure. And to be honest, all of us are susceptible to peer pressure, even as adults. So it is really easy to kind of fall in this category. And the last 3, the lack of empathy, the positive view of violence, and then the aggression or the poor self-regulation are actually things that we see in psychiatric disorders and personality disorders. So if you do notice this in your child, or if you notice this being the cause of someone you see that is bullying, please kind of take note of this, because early mental health counseling would be important for these kids, because they will probably need it at some point in their life. And early intervention is always better than late intervention. And then let's kind of shift over to the targets. So sometimes the targets are either socially isolated, they don't have that many friends. They can also suffer from mental health issues. So that's depression, anxiety, low self-esteem. They might be perceived as weak. So whether that's physically weak, mentally weak, kids with disabilities, LGBT youth, and basically anyone that's perceived as different could be a victim of bullying. And in all honesty, when we go to school, nobody looks exactly like us or talks exactly like us, right? We're going to have underweight kids, overweight kids, people of different ethnic backgrounds, people that are more well-off than us, less well-off than us. And that's kind of why conversations with our kids from a very early age in terms of accepting differences, making sure that we respect others for who they are, making sure that they know the difference between right and wrong is going to be important to have a daily conversation about these things. And now we're going to shift gears just in terms of health consequences. So this is something that's really important, because when you think about bullying, you think about what's going on in and of itself at that moment, but it actually affects the health of these individuals, and it can significantly impact the health. So when you look at, again, the 2 different categories, the perpetrators, we're going to start off, and some of these do overlap with the targets as well, but a lot of them are at risk for alcohol or substance abuse later in life. They do have a higher risk to drop out of school, and that could be either one, they're suffering from their own mental health concerns or issues. It could be that they're missing a lot of school because they're getting in trouble a lot, you know, for spitting on people, beating people up, whatever it might be, so they're not doing well in school. And it could also lead to early sexual activity. So with that comes a lot of things. So at risk for sexually transmitted infections at an earlier age, HIV/AIDS, human papillomavirus, which is the leading cause of cervical cancer, teen pregnancy. So there's a lot of kind of things that come along with just early sexual activity. And then criminal activity. So the things that we talked about before in terms of lack of empathy or viewing violence as a positive thing, like I said, those are actually sometimes indicative of personality or psychological disorders. And then sometimes we'll see that in criminal activity as well. So some of those kids that exhibit those traits can actually later on in life become, you know, criminals. And then domestic abuse is also something that we see sometimes. And then shifting over to the targets, so they can suffer from the same mental health issues: depression, anxiety, panic disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder. And somatic complaints is something that I highlight because that's actually something that we see quite often in the emergency room and in clinics, and it's something that's overlooked often. So from a very early age, kids will often hold stress in their head and their belly. So whether they're just sick from the flu or a cold or a little stomach virus, or whether they're stressed out about something, often if you ask them what hurts, what doesn't feel good, they'll point to their head or their belly, even if that's not the true source of pain. So think about the kid that, if any of you guys have kids that, you know, say, oh, I don't want to go to school today, my head hurts, or I don't want to go to school today, my belly hurts. And if you see this pattern quite often in these kids, or if you have the pattern where the school nurse calls you and says, hey, so-and-so had to sit out of class for, you know, an hour today because their head was hurting and they had to lay down in my office. And this happened 3 times last week. Or you have the teacher calling you saying, hey, so-and-so is complaining of belly pain, and it's happened quite a bit. I really think you should take him to the doctor. You go visit the doctor, and the doctor says, after a medical exam, maybe some x-rays, some lab tests, that everything looks okay. I don't see anything medically wrong with the kid. Don't just chalk it off and say, okay, well, maybe they just don't want to go to school, because there really is an underlying reason as to why they want to miss school that often. There has to be something underlying them that's stressing them out. So please really take a note of that. And just a little kind of side note, I had a kid the other day in the emergency room. He was a little bit older, was complaining of chest pain and trouble breathing. And I was lucky enough where it wasn't that busy of a night, and I was able to talk to the kid. And the mom said that, he always complains of chest pain. He always is fine when he comes to the emergency room. I don't know what else to do. We did an x-ray just to kind of reassure them. And after talking with the kid for a while, I later found out that the kid was being made fun of because he was obese. And it's real. And so just kind of really take into account when your kid tells you these kind of things that don't sound real. They don't really have that perceived, sense of something is actually wrong. Some of these kids can actually do poorly in school, and suicidality is definitely something that is one of the more serious consequences of bullying. If bullying does lead to suicide, it's usually one of several risk factors. It's never going to be the sole cause. And most teens who are bullied are actually not suicidal, but cyberbullying is actually more associated with it. And if you think about it, that kind of goes back to the whole fact that it's 24/7 in nature, right? So suicidal thoughts should be taken just as seriously as any sort of attempt to commit suicide. So please kind of take anything that your kid says really seriously when it comes to this. And then just kind of highlight a little bit more. So poor health outcomes later in life. So one of the things we see is obesity, and whether that's related to stress, which is known to be a cause of obesity, or just the fact that sometimes that could be they're outsourced in terms of making them feel better, right? They don't feel good at school. They don't feel good at whatever venue they're being bullied in. So they kind of seek comfort in food. That's some of the things we see. Victims of bullying are actually less likely to have steady jobs later in life and have poor social relationships. And they, as well as the perpetrators, are also at risk for violence and substance abuse and risk of becoming a young parent or early sexual activity.
So we just want to point out, as we're thinking about the impacts of bullying, we spent a good bit of time talking about the target of the bullying as well as the child who does the bullying. But research is also showing that students who witness bullying or bystanders also have negative impacts. And I think the main point to think about here is that there's been a large amount of recent research that indicates that the children who have experienced bullying can have these risks that follow them into adulthood. So whether that's health impact, mental health, or even psychological health, seeing these impacts of trauma that really do follow the child into adulthood. And I think we did a really nice job already of covering some of the mental and physical consequences of bullying, but I just wanted to mention academic consequences. We're seeing this, again, not just in the student who is bullied, but also the student doing the bullying. We know that the student who does the bullying, they're more likely to drop out earlier. They are more likely to talk back to adults and get into disciplinary trouble in school, grade suffering, obviously. The student who's bullied is often looking for ways to avoid school. And we talked about the child who says they have a stomachache or headache or is having sleeping problems and is trying to avoid going to school the next day. But as parents, I think we also need to think about the kiddo who perhaps they're being bullied in gym class, and so we see a frequent pattern of that student going to the nurse's office and saying, oh, my stomach hurts, could I just lie down during next period? I think I'll feel better after that. Or asking for a pass to the library or the guidance office. But with this pattern that parents and schools should be talking to each other to try and figure out, is there a bullying situation that's going on that may be impacting the child's desire to go to class. Kids who are being bullied will often see decreases in their academic performance. I mean, think about it. As adults, if we've got some problem that's going on, our ability to pay attention at work decreases. It's no different for our kids. If they're worried about being bullied or teased or harassed, their ability to focus on their schoolwork really suffers. So I want to talk just for a little bit here about when bullying crosses the line into more serious types of behavior, which may violate civil rights or criminal laws. You know, when we look at this list that you have in front of you, we see the type of bullying, such as physical bullying. Well, that could be charged as disorderly conduct or simple or aggravated assault, depending on how bad the behavior is. Gender bullying could be sexual harassment, sexual assault, dating abuse, domestic violence. You know, I don't want to read through this entire list, but we often have folks who still want to classify bullying as just kids being kids, or just bad behavior that is a part of childhood that, you know, you survive it as a rite of passage. But the point of this slide is to think about the fact that some of these behaviors, when we pull aside the bullying aspect of it, they are in and of themselves serious civil or criminal law violations and have related harms associated to the person who is victimized by these crimes. Some guidance that's provided by the U.S. Department of Education and U.S. Department of Justice is found in the form of Dear Colleague letters on the next slide. And just wanted to mention that we do have federal civil rights statutes that are listed here on this slide, which prohibit discrimination or harassment on the basis of federally protected classes. Civil Rights Act of 1964 covers race, color, national origin, and religion. Title IX prohibits discrimination and harassment on the basis of sex. And Section 504 of the Rehabilitations Act, as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act and the IDEA, all prohibit discrimination on the basis of disability. So when we think about bullying, it's not just kids being kids. Ultimately, it truly is a question of rights. It's a question of human rights. We should and do strive to protect children from bullying, not just because we're concerned about lawsuits, but because children should have a right to attend school where they are safe and they're valued and they're respected and treated with dignity. We mentioned earlier that we were going to look at the different roles that kids play in bullying. We spend a lot of time and attention focused on the child A, that's the child who starts the bullying, and the child H, the child who is bullied, and rightfully so. They are the main actors, if you will, in a bullying situation. But when we think about any child who observes bullying, they have a role in the bullying. Some of them take part in an active way. Some of them are supportive in an less active way, and some of them are totally disengaged, right? So if we look at B, they're the followers. They don't start the bullying, but they're more than happy to jump in once it starts. Supporters are supporting that bullying, but may not take an active role. They may be the ones who are just kind of stirring the pot, saying, hey, did you see what happened? Did you see that post on Facebook? Isn't that interesting? Or whatever. So they're trying to gain support around the bullying. The passive supporters are ones who like it but don't want to get in trouble. So these are the kids that kind of stand in the background with a smirk. They're enjoying someone else being intentionally harmed but not actually engaging in the behavior. The disengaged onlookers speak for themselves. They just don't want any part of it, and so they walk away. If it's happening through social media, they disengage from that media. The kids at F are the ones who don't like bullying but don't always know how to stop it. We often see these kids stepping up after the fact to give support to the child who was bullied, but not necessarily in the moment. While the kids at G are the ones who, right in the moment, they have the strength of character and purpose to be able to step in and stand up with the child who's being bullied to express that they don't like that bullying. Now, when we look at Olveus bullying questionnaire data, what it tells us is that 80% of kids don't like bullying. So that really means that we have a huge pool of untapped potential to really target bullying and turn the tide around. If 80% of kids don't like bullying and they feel bad for the child who's targeted, our job is teaching those children how they should stand up in helpful ways. I think it's also important to talk about the fact that bullying really has some group mechanisms or social dynamics within the bullying. On the next slide, we think about the fact that when kids are engaged in bullying, it's not always the same child in the same role. So what I mean by that is, depending on the group of peers that a child is with, they may be acting in ways to bully others with one group of peers, but in another group of peers, they may be the target of someone who's doing bullying behavior. So it really is important that as we think about kids and the bullying dynamic, that we not label kids because the child who bullies in one situation may not bully in another. The social contagion piece, when the person who's doing the bullying is perceived as being very popular or very powerful or very admired, that bullying behavior can become contagious. Like others, especially those who are less secure in themselves, may join into the behavior because they think that it's a way to become more popular. We see, the group mentality piece. Kids who wouldn't normally engage in bullying behaviors in a one-on-one situation may engage in those because of a weakening inhibition against the aggression. We also know that when multiple students are bullying one student or another group of student, there's a decreased sense of individual responsibility. That whole, well, we were all doing it defense that kids sometimes will raise. And then the last point to make here is that over time, kids who are repeatedly bullied may be viewed as less worthy of respectful treatment than others. So we might see kids feeling like certain children are, quote unquote, asking for it, asking to be bullied, or blamed because they're being bullied. Next slide.
I think all of us wonder, what can we do as parents? So whether it's our child is child A or child H or child C or D, either way, we want to help these kids kind of go through this this process and come out confident and not having sort of challenges to face. I wish it was as easy as just waving a magic wand, and unfortunately it's not. But we can definitely do things as parents. One of the things that is not just specific to bullying, it should be as part of parenting and part of just kind of developing a relationship with your child, and just making your child kind of grow up into a confident adult, is just talking to your child a routine part of your day. So one of the facts that I found interesting when I was like looking this up was that only 2 in 5 kids will actually tell an adult that they're being bullied. So it could be that they're embarrassed. It could be that they don't have the relationship with their parent to even feel comfortable to talk to them about this. Could be that they feel that if they tell their parent is going to take matters into their own hands and make it worse. But either way, we're only having a few kids telling their parent or an adult that this is actually going on. And studies have actually shown that it takes 15 minutes a day, as minimal as 15 minutes a day, listening and talking to your child to build a strong foundation, build trust, build a trusting relationship. And this can actually help your child in many ways, but specific in regards to this talk, help your child recognize and respond to bullying in a confident manner. And one of the key things that we have to think about is that when we're talking to our kids, it's really easy to be the parent and be the lecturer. I'm 34 years old and my mom still lectures me every day, but we have to listen, right? So we have to listen to them. They have their ideas. They have things that they want to speak about. And if they know that they can come to you for anything, sometimes just whether they want you as a sounding board, sometimes if they want advice from you, whatever it might be, listening to them is going to go a long way. And it's actually interesting because contrary to the popular belief, kids actually do want to talk to us. They do want to seek advice from us. So if we show that we are there for them, that's going to really be helpful. And when they are those 2 in 5 kids that tell their parents, and hopefully ultimately we can get to the 5 in 5 kids that will tell their parents, it's really important not to overreact. So ask them the key questions. What happened? What was involved? Say it in a really kind of neutral tone. How long has it been going on for? Why do you think it happened? Are you upset? How did it make you feel? And just keep in mind that kids are not going to be using the term bully. It's something that we use, but they don't use. So these questions are really going to be key in helping us decide whether this is actually a bullying kind of case or not. If your child is able to write, it would be actually great to have them write things down because that'll help kind of keep their flow of thoughts all in one. And once you decide that this meets bullying or meets the definition of bullying, the question is that do you need to take action? And also just keep in mind that your kid is not looking for anything more than just this behavior to stop. They don't want to go to school feeling scared every day. They don't want to come back from school feeling shamed or disrespected or sad for what happened. That's all they want. They're not looking for teachable moments. They're not looking for revenge. They just want this behavior to stop. So just keep that in the forefront of your mind whenever you decide what action needs to be taken. And first and foremost, I think it would be good to ask your child what they would like to do first, because if they can handle this on their own, that would be the most ideal scenario for many reasons. So one, these kids feel disempowered already. So we want to give them some of their power back. And two, it's so much better to be able to have them leave the situation confident that if this were to happen again, that they would be able to handle it on their own. And just to kind of highlight that same point that I mentioned, that one of the main reasons kids don't tell their parents is because they think that we're going to make it worse. So really, we need to work with them to kind of figure out how best they would want to handle it. And obviously, we need to do it in a way that it will work, but we should put the power in their hands. And if they do feel confident and comfortable with, dealing with their quote unquote bully by themselves, role play is going to be important. And then just making sure that they do it in a safe place. So, after school behind the bleachers where there's no one around is probably not the best place to address somebody that's been kicking you at school on a regular basis, right? You want to make sure that it's a safe environment for them and make sure that there's a trusted adult in case things don't go the way that they wanted it to go. And it's always important, if you do need to get involved, please, please, please refrain from contacting the parents directly. So they're the parents of the other child, right? That's going to lead to defensiveness from their end and possibly further conflict. And contact a school. So every school has a bullying policy, and most of them have cyberbullying ones. And I think we addressed this earlier, but the schools are responsible for a thorough investigation and an appropriate response. And if you decide that what they're doing is not enough for you, you have the right to appeal, you have the right to be persistent. And I will tell you that a lot of parents that I've seen in the emergency rooms sometimes feel helpless, and it's kind of one phone call and it didn't work out in terms of the school not doing something or whatever that they don't feel is being addressed correctly, and then they kind of give up. So I would really encourage you guys to not give up. Know that you have a lot of resources, and we're going to talk about some of the resources that you have access to at the end of this talk. But please don't give up, because it is your right and your child's right to have this resolved. And then a couple of things. So if there are physical threats, please contact the police. For anything based on race or gender or disability, contact the Office of Civil Rights. And anytime that's possible, collect evidence. So if you're going to be contacting some of these offices or even talking to your school, the more information you have, the better your case will be and the easier it will be to kind of help you. For cyberbullying, so cyberbullying actually violates the terms and services of all legitimate service providers. So contact the content provider. Even if your kid has no clue who is on the other end, please contact that provider. And there's actually an updated list of contact information on this link below, cyberbullying.us/report. That's being updated constantly. So pretty much every agency that you would want to contact would be on there. And then it's only a brief line about this, but this is honestly one of the most important things. So even if we get to the point where we've addressed the bullying, the bully and the victim and all the kind of key players in this have been, addressed, and we're no longer seeing this at school for this particular child, you have to think about mental health counseling. So it could be something as simple as having a school counselor maybe come visit once a week for the kid. In some severe cases, they might need to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist regularly. In severe cases, they might even need to be on medication depending on how severe the mental health kind of consequences they're facing. But we really need to figure out a way that these kids can move forward and not have this be haunting them for the rest of their lives and really affecting them from a health perspective later on. So some other contacts for you guys. The Office of Human Rights has some great information on there. They have different pamphlets in a variety of languages, I think English, Spanish, Mandarin, and a couple other languages, and pamphlets that you guys can actually download and print out. And if we have not sent you this, we will send you the Families and Bullying document, which has a little bit more information basically on the DC policy that's more specific to the DC policy, but both Maryland and Virginia also have policies, as do other states, in regards to bullying. And it also has links to a lot of different resources that you guys can have access to, and that would be helpful. So that is the end of, I think, at least the informational piece. Natasha?
Sure. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So this is a lot of great information. If you have any questions, we've got some time for questions. So if you want to type in the question in the chat box, feel free to do so. In the meantime, I do want to share one resource that we have. The Lawyers Committee has a Stop Hate project, which has a national resource hotline. Which takes calls that folks can report hate crimes and hate incidents. So if there is an issue going on at your school, please call the hotline, which will type in the numbers here in the chat box. But also, if you have a child who has experienced bullying or discrimination, or if you know a parent who is also experiencing bullying and discrimination at their school, PrEP is offering a platform where parents can video chat and conduct a virtual appointment with our pro bono attorneys for students who are located in California, New York, and Mississippi. So that is also another option that is available to parents and students in different areas. So for the Stop Hate hotline, the number is 844-9-NO-HATE. For our PrEP virtual appointments, you can make an appointment at prepparents.org/appointments, or you can call our hotline at 844-PrEP-4US. And we are taking any other questions if you might have some. I think someone else had asked earlier if we're making the slides available. And so we'll post the slides and then as well as the recording to the PrEP website. And we'll also send out an email if you registered online to that group as well. Are there any other questions? We have some time. And then I'm just going to post the link also to the SurveyMonkey if you can fill it out. Basically letting us know how the information was on this webinar and to give us some suggestions for future topics as well. We'll wait for your questions, but if not, maybe Mansi or Michelle, do you want to end with any closing comments? We've got about 5 minutes to go.
This is Michelle. I just wanted to say that, you know, as parents, we have a desire to just make sure that our kids are feeling safe and comfortable in the spaces where they are. And, you know, sometimes I think it's easier as parents to know what to do, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult. And hopefully the information that we provided you on this webinar have been helpful. I'd also like to just mention that we do have some resources available at the Center for Safe Schools there's a bullying prevention toolkit, as well as a handout called What Every Parent Should Know About Bullying. I'm going to type the URL for the center's website, and feel free to check those out.
I don't have anything else specific to add, but just wanted to reiterate that my email is on there, and if you guys have any questions or comments or anything that you want more information about, please feel free to reach out to me. And we have a Child Health Advocacy Institute that does a lot of advocacy efforts in the community, and so I'd be happy to kind of put you in contact with them as well in terms of any sort of events that they might be hosting regarding bullying or other kind of topics that you're interested in.
And PrEP also offers, since we have so many community advocates on the webinar as well, we also offer a lot of different resources that you can share with parents. We've started to develop comic strips for parents that go through step-by-step on what to do if your child is being bullied, as well as how to document bullying incidents. And so that's available on our PrEP website, and something that you can download and share with the parents at your school. If there are no other questions, we'll keep the chat box open until at least 4 o'clock. But we'll go ahead and mute ourselves. But please feel free to contact us in the future, and please fill out the survey. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. But thanks so much for participating in our webinar. And thank you to Michelle and Mansi. This is great information.
Thanks for having us, Natasha.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a user that looks like they raised their hand. Is Vince Lauren, did you have a question? So the question is, how can you encourage parents to volunteer to prevent bullying at school, bus stops, and assist schools? Assist schools in the hallways. And that's open to Natasha and our panelists.
Well, in Pennsylvania, we have some updated laws in response to the Jerry Sandusky scandal at Penn State. So every parent volunteer has to go through an FBI background check and a state police background check and a check by child welfare to make sure that there hasn't been any type of incident in the past. So that applies even to volunteers. And so in Pennsylvania, the first piece of guidance we give to schools is making sure that they are having all their volunteers have the proper clearances. And there is a mechanism for volunteers to get those clearances for free, so there's not a price tag associated with it, but we do like to make sure that the people who are in our schools volunteering do have a clean background, that we don't have to worry about any type of child abuse situation. And then the second thing is making sure that we provide training for any volunteers that we have. But I mean, it's an awesome way that we can increase adult supervision by using volunteers, whether we're talking about cafeteria volunteers or folks who are in the hallways or bus monitors or just thinking about where those hotspots are, because bullying does increase in areas where adult supervision is lacking.
And there's a follow-up question. How can we get the school board on board to have this program?
Well, every state has some type of law that is requiring some level of bullying prevention effort. So it really depends on what the law of each state says. But that's where I would start first. I'd take a look at what the laws are for your state to see what requirements school districts have, because, for example, in Pennsylvania, every district has to have an anti-bullying policy. They have to collect data around bullying and report that to the state. They have to have a person who investigates complaints of bullying, and they're encouraged to utilize some type of bullying prevention program to help guide their efforts. So I'd say, why don't you take a look at what laws are in place as the starting point, because schools have to meet that requirement.
And we had an additional question about other organizations that do anti-bullying work. Natasha, are you still on or want to assist with that question?
Sure. So there are a lot of local groups that are focused on anti-bullying efforts, and I don't have them specifically, so it would be helpful to know like what area you are located in. But there are several other national organizations that work on anti-bullying efforts, and we're always open to partnering. And I know, like Safe Schools, we're fortunate to work with the Center for Safe Schools and the Center for Education Equity as well, in Silver Spring and Chicago. So we've been doing a lot of work with the Communities United Against Hate in Montgomery County. And so that's a great resource that they've been pulling together. They're hosting a conference on October 22nd, and I'll actually be speaking there more about anti-bullying efforts and what parents can do. So there's a lot of resources in that community. In Chicago, we do have a Chicago Lawyers Committee who has been looking into supporting more efforts. But if you want more specific details, if you want to send an email to prep@lawyerscommittee.org, we can provide some more specifics and maybe help find you some other organizations in the Chicago area as well. I have not heard of FSPagainstbullying.org. I'm not familiar with that organization. But I do want to, yeah, we can maybe continue this conversation offline. If you want to just reach out to us directly, I'll type in the email address to connect with us. That would be great. But for the meantime, thank you for joining us today, and thank you to Mansi and Michelle for facilitating a really great webinar. We'll be posting the video shortly, and you'll receive an email if you signed up, and we'll share the information. But thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.